So today we will focus on GitHub, as I mentioned, how to source developers through GitHub. It's one of the tools we used just recently to get really great candidates from. Hi, Adalina. Hello, hello. So today we will review GitHub. So in the last few sessions, we were mainly looking at LinkedIn and how can we find candidates based on our knowledge of the frameworks and languages, like a backend developer or data engineer. Last week, we were focusing on a DevOps engineer, right? So now today, I will show you how we found developers through GitHub. Do you guys know anything about GitHub? Have you used it ever to source developers? Let us know in chat what's your experience with GitHub. If you used it, just type yes. And if you have not used it, just type no. Yes, yes. Cool. Great, great. What's your experience so far, Juliana? Have you found the great candidates? Chris hasn't. Cool. Denisa, not yet. Email found. Oh, right. It's a definitely good way to found candidates' email addresses at first and then approach them with some good message. So I would kick it off with some like really easy and straightforward position. Like we were, for example, looking for a full stack developer with Node.js experience, tech stack. So that was a full stack developer, full stack engineer, which is relatively straightforward, right? The candidate uses either on the back end, in our case, it was Node.js, on the front end, React. So that's relatively straightforward. We covered this a few times. But then the question is, what else is needed? What other skill, what plugin or framework could we use or target at the developer based on? And in this particular case, we were looking for a full stack developer, Node.js and React, who has experience with some video related technologies. And Elena, you also submitted some really good candidates. We were also conducting search through GitHub. I'll show you how we found great candidates using the one particular keyword. So I'll stop sharing this screen and I'll show you GitHub. And before I show you like how to really use GitHub, I'll just really quickly tell you how do developers use GitHub, what is it actually really good for? Because in fact, I've used GitHub for a long time. While I was the developer, I was using it really, really often. So I'll just log in here on GitHub, and I'll show you my profile, 586118. Can you guys see my screen? Hopefully, yes. So if we, for example, just look at my profile, and I'm by any means, I'm not a developer anymore, but I have some repositories. So developers use GitHub to store the code they write in the cloud. So Git is the technology, GitHub is a tool, software as a service tool, and developers store the code on GitHub. So for example, if you go to my profile, I can share this link in chat. So you can open up the same screen on your laptop. You would see that I have created 27 repositories here on GitHub. So these are the public repositories. I have contributed to some private repositories that are just not published because they are not for public to see. What we can see on GitHub is these public repositories. So in my case, I have a profile here. If you are logged in, you can also see my email address. You can see a link to my website. So, just keep in mind that GitHub is not a tool for recruiters. It's mainly for developers. So they create some kind of a platform where developers are supposed to connect, but we recruiters can also use it to get contacts to developers. if we find someone who is a good fit. So what we can see if we click to some of these repositories, for example, look, I have a React repository here, but I have not contributed to React. So just beware when you open up these repositories, just make sure that you select the type to sources, because I can add to my list of repositories even those repositories where I have not contributed to, which is a little tricky. So if you just look at the list of my repositories, you may be sort of misguided, and you may think, oh my gosh, like Michael has contributed to all these repositories. While in fact, I have not. I just forked them. So the technical term is fork, F-O-R-K. Fork means copy, create a duplicate of a particular repository. So this is the case with React, where I have created a copy of this particular repository on my profile. So I have not contributed to that one. And that's why it is good to just search by sources. Okay, so in this case, I want to see only those repositories where I have contributed to. So I have created some source code. And these repositories are, for example, some questionnaire or some front-end website, some assignment, some sample database. And now what is really cool is you can open up this repository, which is a folder with files and the other subfolders. And you can see all these files with some timestamp. So I created this repository 5 years ago. All these subfolders include some other files. Okay, so we in recruitment can see some activity of potential candidates. We can see what technologies they worked with, when have they contributed to a particular repository, which is really cool because we can assess if the candidate is a good fit or not. In this case, I have created a repository which was based on, for example, JavaScript, or this is another JavaScript repository. So I can open it up, and you can see, I can see, anyone can see, because it's a public repository. We all can see the code. I can open it up. I can go to JavaScript. I can open up MDB.js, and you all would see what code I wrote and published on GitHub 4 years ago, which is good if we want to assess the quality of the candidate, or the, say, the time when he or she started working with a particular technology. So this is the code. You can see the exact code, which is really amazing, because years ago, say 10, 20 years ago, code used to be just private, very confidential. And now there is this trend to publish everything under the public license, MIT license, so everyone can see the code. Not like in all cases, obviously, there is also some confidential code, but you get the point. So we can also use this to our advantage when we are looking for developers who, for example, use JavaScript, or when we are looking for someone who uses Angular. So we can use the search bar right here to look for people who have experience with a particular framework or language or library. But before I show you the exact strategy, I'll go back to the profile and I'll show you one more thing, which is the activity, the contributions. For example, one of our clients was looking only for clients who are really active when it comes to contributing to open source on a regular basis. They only wanted candidates who contribute regularly, which is not my case. Just by looking at these empty boxes, the green indicates some commit, and the gray indicates no activity on GitHub. So for example, a year ago, two years ago, 3 years ago, I used to be active, but I'm not active anymore, as you can see. So when a client was asking to only submit candidates who are active in open source projects, this is exactly the chart we were using to distinguish if someone has been active, and we submitted those who were most active when contributing to open source. And now, in this case, you can see my email address. It is right here. But if you, in some cases, do not see the address, if the developer has decided not to publish it this way, you can use an extension. For example, my favorite extension is contact out. Contact out is the extension that enables you to just click here on the right and show the email address right away. Okay, so this is my old email address. They have not updated it actually. I used to have this email address 2-3 years ago. But in many cases, you can find the most recent version, especially if developers use GitHub actively, it's very likely you will see here at the most recent version. Okay, so contact out is one of these extensions, but there are more, obviously, more extensions that you can use to get contact details. So the way we were approaching it was a colleague of mine was going through the source. So she was sourcing, submitting candidates' details to a spreadsheet, and then I was approaching them with some strong message to get their attention. So coming back to the example of the full stack developer who uses Node.js and React, they required a specific skill, which was the knowledge of FFmpeg. So it's FFmpeg. I'll also type it in chat, FFmpeg. And this is a specific library that is supposed to convert audio and video. If someone has used FFmpeg, then the person would be a good fit for the particular position. So we used this information to actually find people on GitHub instead of LinkedIn, assuming that people who have written some code using the FFmpeg library would have experience with video, and they would be good candidates for this client, which turned out to be correct. We found like really great and very strong candidates. So you can go to this search bar and just search FFmpeg at first. You don't want to search just in this user, you want to search across the whole GitHub. And I'll show you a few criterias how to approach it. So a few options. You can choose a language. You can choose, for example, Shell, Python, JavaScript. So you are looking for FFmpeg, which is this library or a piece of code, or just this term written somewhere on a user's profile. You can use for, or you can look for people who have, for example, the term, I don't know, passionate, and you would search for people who have it on their profile. So let's see, passionate programmer, or even in their usernames, effective and disciplined, passionate about solutions. So you can look for developers who have it in their profile. With the word passionate, it doesn't make probably that much sense, right? Because it doesn't really tell us anything about the quality of the developer. But I'm just giving this as an example. Vincenzo Ferrari, passionate developer, look, from Italy. And he has his email address here, so we can approach him right away, even without any extension. We can look at what does he work with. We can right away see he works with JavaScript. You see it right here, JavaScript, JavaScript, JavaScript. We see he has 174 repositories. So if we were to look for a passionate JavaScript developer, this developer would be maybe a good fit. We would not just look through all these repositories, but rather those sources. We are only interested in those repositories where he contributed with some code. For example, Sherry, as an example, share your files effortlessly with QR codes. Okay, I open up the repository and I see he created it already a year ago. I see some code, index.js. There is some README. So yeah, he created it. I can see his name. He contributed. So he seems to be a real JavaScript developer, backend, front-end developer. Okay, but this was just an example of the passionate search and how to derive some value from what we can see on his profile. His activity in the last year, he was coding 2 years ago, 3 years ago. He was most active 4 or 5 years ago. You see, and he started in 2011. So he's been coding for a few years, definitely for 10 years, in fact. He has a link to his Stack Overflow account. We can reach out to him right away. And then it's just a question what to reach out to him with, like what kind of message to send. I would definitely connect to something I see on his profile. I would say maybe something like, hey, Vincenzo, I see you've been active on GitHub for the last 10 years, and we are looking for a JavaScript developer who has a solid experience. And I noticed you've been publishing repositories in JavaScript. So I just wanted to discuss X, Y, and Z. Okay, so you link what you see on his GitHub profile with some, with the bridge to what you are, what do you actually want from him. All right, so the other way to conduct the search would be to look for the library FFmpeg. So we want to look for not something that is written on the profile, even though some developers also have FFmpeg written on their profiles. For example, this Achilles developer or XRZ, they may also have it on their profile. They must be really enthusiastic about this particular library, about this particular technology, if they choose to highlight it on their profile. Focused area, OpenGL, OpenCV, and FFmpeg. Okay, so as a reminder, FFmpeg is a library that is used to process audio and video. So it's very likely that these developers work with video, say some video streaming applications, something like Zoom, for example, or on a mobile video streaming apps like Instagram stories or something similar. Now, if we don't see a contact detail, such as in this case, we can use the extension contact out, for example. Well, in this case, personal email unavailable. Fair enough, fair enough. So we would not be able to get it from the extension. The next step would be to just copy this to LinkedIn and see if we can find the profile with the same name on LinkedIn and then approach him over there. So this is one of the ways when people have it on their profile stated right away, even though, for example, in that case, in the case of this developer, you can see that he is a C++ developer. And I mentioned we would be looking for a full stack JavaScript developer. So even if this developer is using FFmpeg, he would not be a good fit for the full stack JavaScript developer who has experience with FFmpeg, just because he doesn't seem to work with JavaScript. We could review his other repositories, but it seems like he focuses on C++. Maybe he creates some games or 2D, 3D applications that utilize video. So we can find some other developer who has FFmpeg written on the profile, plus has more experience with JavaScript. So this is quite mundane work. You need to go through these profiles one by one. So what we did was I had a colleague of mine who was going through all these profiles and based on these criteria, creating a spreadsheet, a short list of candidates, and then I was approaching those candidates. Conch, Queen Conch, for example. Let's see this developer or Martin. So you see these codecs or libraries. So what we did eventually is we looked at also some alternative codecs, alternatives technologies, not just FFmpeg, but also WebRTC or H.264. Some of these other codecs that are also used for video streaming. So that's another trick eventually that you can utilize to look at how you can expand your keywords based on what you see and what you find on other people's profiles. So this developer, Queen Conch or Martin Ming, this Martin Ming works with Python, so also not the best fit for a JavaScript developer. And Conch also uses C++. So you see, sometimes you need to open up one profile, another profile, just to identify who could be a good fit. And the other approach would be also to, for example, look for repositories which include FFmpeg. So those repositories where FFmpeg as the library was used, and you would then look at who contributed to those repositories, which is also another approach. Like you can look for JavaScript code base, which is coming back to the full stack JavaScript developer. And now with this, I zoomed in to, for example, this repository, Kagami, who has created FFmpeg.js repository. It's some library that he has created, and I can now click to the user's profile again. So Kagami's user's profile. I click right here, and I'm able to find out a little more about this developer. So this Kagami at genshiken.org is a developer who meets both criteria. He is using FFmpeg with a specific library that indicates someone has experience with video or audio processing. And at the same time, he uses JavaScript, as you can see. And he's quite active, well, for the last few months, not as much last year. In 2020, also not much, but at least, you see he's been on GitHub for the last 11 years. So this must be a rather senior developer, even if he's not contributing on a daily basis. And we see his profile right away. It's right here, Kagami at Genshiken, his blog on Medium. We can open it up and we can see if he is still active. Probably he writes some articles about video or audio, image compression. So you see he is working in this area, even though it was 2 years ago. And maybe there would be some additional contact to get in touch with him. But this is his profile. And then I would open up his repositories. We know the one that focused on FFmpeg, but what about the other repositories? So there are over 100 repositories that he has on his profile. As before, I'm only interested in those where he has contributed to. So not forks, not archived, but sources. I only want to see sources. I open them up and I will see. Has it reloaded already or not yet? It's probably it had. So I see that he has been using both Shell, a scripting language, and Golang, and also JavaScript. So quite a lot of languages. He has also worked with C++. So just by looking at this, I see he's rather a senior developer who can work with different programming languages, JavaScript, C++, Golang, Shell, which indicates he must have been developing for, I don't know, 5, 7, 10 years at least, because juniors usually focus on 1 or 2 languages at max. He's based in Russia, so we can see quite a lot of information on his profile, which is really cool, right? So this is how we found a developer who meets pretty much all these criteria. He is a senior developer. He has been using JavaScript, so he's a full stack developer, and he has worked with FFmpeg. So that gives us the information. It's safe to assume that he works with audio and video based on his work with FFmpeg. Does it make sense, guys? It's quite straightforward, right? It's quite a mundane work to go through all these profiles and analyze them this way. But at the same time, it works just because developers use GitHub. They are on GitHub every day, even if they don't contribute to a public repository. They may contribute to some private repository, so they still have their profiles on GitHub, and that's how we can find them. So here there is a list of 1,378 repository results, which means we can spend hours and hours going through all these profiles, identify those who use JavaScript, who has worked with FFmpeg, and we see their contact details. If the detail is not on GitHub right away, then we can use the extension contact out or whatever other extension you prefer to get your contacts. We could also look for other kind of developers, for example, C++ or Java or C, Python, as you can see here on the left-hand side. So it's not an easy to use tool for recruiters, but it can be to some extent. And there is one more trick I would like to show you, because you can also look for developers in a specific country or in a specific location. For example, imagine you would like to look for JavaScript developers who are based in Poland, for example, in Poland or Warsaw. So you could go to this advanced search, and you can search for users with a specific name, which is not what we want, but the location is interesting. So you can type Poland, and you hit enter, and you will only see developers who are based in Poland. But the disadvantage of a location on GitHub is, I need to drop some of these other criteria. So say location Poland. The disadvantage of this location is that anyone can type anything. For example, this developer has chosen to type St. Petersburg, Russia, but I can type anything. I can type in English, I can type in my local language, I can just type the number of country, I can type the name of the city only. So we recruiters need to take this into consideration, and we cannot just type Poland, for example, because there may be developers who wrote, for example, Warsaw, right, the name of the city, or other developers who wrote, for example, Krakow, which is the other name of the second city. So what we can do is to use this search to include all of these combinations. So for example, Krakow or Warsaw or Poland, right? We can come up with all these different combinations and use them as or statements. So Poland or Warsaw or Krakow, for example, Poland or So let's see if they type something like this. And I just want to show you how it works on my profile. So I have written Bratislava, Slovakia, but I could type anything. I could type just Bratislava, or I can type just Slovakia, or some developers only type SK, like Slovakia, so the country code. So we need to take this into consideration when arranging this search. Let's see some of these developers, what do they write on their profile. Michal, his name is also Michal. It's a wonderful name, right? The other developer is Fatih. So he wrote Poland. But there are also other developers who write, and we can try it. Let me just type Warsaw, for example, or Wrocław, or some other cities. I don't even know what are all these cities in Poland, but we can try a few. For example, from Warsaw. Search. Meanwhile, in this other window, you see Poland only, also his email address. Fatih also just wrote Poland. So some developers don't type which city are they from, but they just type the country. And we see 51,000 users who wrote, has it reloaded? Probably not. No, this is still Poland or Warsaw. So this didn't work. We need to drop this string. And you see, I went to advanced search, I hit a search, but it somehow didn't work. So it's really a good idea always to revisit the search, as you can see it here. Sometimes it's a little tricky. So now I remove this part and I only keep location Warsaw. So let's see what happens now. And there will be some people who have only written Warsaw. So they don't type Poland, they only type Warsaw. So if what I'm trying to say is that if you would only look for people who are in Poland, so you type Poland, then this developer would not be included in the search result because he hasn't written manually on his profile Poland. So just take this into consideration when you are composing the search string, that you need to have location Poland or location Krakow or location Gdansk or location, just enumerate a few countries, cities within Poland. And maybe, maybe some developers will just type PL, which is the country code of Poland. So we can try it out and see if there are some people only with PL in their location. Let's see. I'm really curious. I was looking at some developers, and obviously we can see Mephistopheles, we can see Maciej. They only write PL. Or even, for example, Lukasz, who is in Poznan, he wrote Poznan, PL. So we just need to be mindful of this. It's really tricky. Unfortunately, GitHub has not like people in GitHub have not decided to have this as a like an autocomplete where you would just choose from some predefined list, which makes it much harder for us, the recruiters, right? We need to combine multiple locations and eventually, use some logic to identify what it should be. So don't forget, it should be PL. I'll type it in chat. PL, Poland, Warsaw, Krakow, Gdansk, Poznan, I don't know, Wrocław. Okay, so some of these larger cities you need to manually enter one by one, because otherwise you may miss out some candidates who, well, in any case, you would most likely miss some of these combinations, like some developer who is in some little village in central Poland. But yeah, that's, I guess, life. So yeah, just don't forget about this. It's a great feature, but it's really tricky to use. What's your experience, guys? Those of you who used GitHub already, how have you looked for developers? Have you only focused in a specific country? Sylvia, you mentioned you used, or Elena, Juliana, like, have you only looked for developers in a specific country? And if yes, what was your trick? Like, how have you restricted the location? Do you have any special tips? Let us know in chat, or raise your hand and I can enable you to speak if you would like to share. And there is one more cool feature, because sometimes you had Milan. Okay, have you also included Italy? Because some developers may not have Milan written. They may have Italy, Romania. In Romania also, I would consider a few cities to list. You include major cities. Great. Also Munich, very cool. And there is one more feature that we used when looking for developers, especially if there are way too many of them. So in this case, there is I know 1,400, and it's still quite a lot to go through. So there is this additional feature you can look for, or you can restrict the search based on the number of stars they have received. So the repositories are favorited by developers, and every like gets a star on GitHub. So you can, for example, look for those who have more than X number of followers, or have X number of public repositories. So in this case, you can have more than 20 repositories. And that's how you can, for example, say if I take a step back, in the first search result right here, we had 1,400 developers, which is probably still quite a lot to go through, right? 1,471. So what we could do is to split it to half. So the first half could be those who have more than 30 public repositories. In this, we would have maybe a half or a third of, or just 100 developers in this particular location with more than 30 public repositories. And then we could have the other half with, say, less than, but not 30. We would have, for example, 10, less than 10 repositories. So more than 10 and less than 10. So this way you split to half roughly. So in the first batch, we would have 400 users. Those who have more than 20 public repositories, we go through them. And then in the search, a second search, we would go through the other 1,000. Is this a suggested? No, it actually depends on the, for example, when you have this FFmpeg, this was more advanced technology. So more people who more contributed to open source, and those people are more likely to have more repositories. So in that case, we use like 20 or 30. In this case, I would just find something that breaks the group to half. So it could be 10, it could be 30. it's just like now, right? Like I try with 30 in this particular group, we had like too few candidates. So I decreased the number, and now 10 seems to be a good number. So 10 for this group, which splits it to two. In one, we have 400 users. In the other, we would have 1,000 or 900 or so. Right. So what we could do in the second, after we go through these first 400, we look for those who have less than 10, or we can have less than 11. So in the first, we have more than 10, in the other less than 11. So we don't exclude anyone. So 1,060 in the second batch. Okay, so this is also a good way to split your work, because sometimes you need to feel this sense of accomplishment. So you can split a group to 2 or 3 groups. So you feel the sense that you got to the end. You celebrate a little, right, at the end of the day. And then the next day you do this, the other screening of these 1,000 potential candidates. And also the local language, indeed, Juliana, as you write. So München, Munich, obviously, yeah, that's a great suggestion. Mm-hmm. Yes. So when it comes to, I guess, what is really the hardest part when it comes to sourcing on GitHub is to identify these keywords. So when I was thinking, because the hiring manager at first didn't tell me what keywords to use, right? So I just knew the person should be strong with video. But then the question is, what does it mean to be strong with video? What does it mean? What frameworks, what tools, what libraries a person who is strong with video usually use? And you can ask the hiring manager, or you can ask some other developers, or you can just figure it out by looking at some other repositories. So one of the cases was, as I was showing you, with some of those profiles. And meanwhile, I'll just show you like FF, MPEG, alternative. Because as soon as you have a good keyword, then you just apply the strategy, and the strategy is always the same. You go through the search. It's not too difficult. Obviously, as soon as you do it once, then you can do it second and third and fourth time. It's just to figure out what keyword to enter. Should you use FFmpeg or Golang? Golang would not make sense, because Golang is a programming language, and that does not mean someone has experience with video or audio. But some other keywords, for example, WebRTC, this is also a video codec. So you just need to figure out what are the tools these people use. And you don't have to know what is a WebRTC. You don't have to know what is FFmpeg. You just need to understand when is it used and what is the purpose of this particular tool. So for example, WebRTC, real-time communication protocol, it supports video, voice, audio, video, real-time communication. So it's likely that those who used WebRTC understand video, audio, real-time transmission. The other alternative is, what was it, HCL? HCL. Let's see if I recall correctly. And I would need to search for like HCL codec. But you get the point, right? So there are different codecs, there are different tools, different libraries that indicate some candidate has experience with a particular domain, whether it is video or the audio or, I don't know, Internet of Things or robotics. So it's our job to identify what it is. It could be FFmpeg or WebRTC, and then we just go to GitHub or LinkedIn and look for people with this particular skill. Which one was it? pandas, numpy, no. Oh, HLS, yeah, this one, HLS. So HLS is also one of these codecs used for video processing, or RTC, WebRTC, GStreamer. You know, like some of these tools you use to, or MPEG, right? So as soon as you see some of these keywords and you are looking for a video expert, then you know you are looking at the right candidate potentially. And just use the keyword to identify these candidates through the GitHub search. So this is, I would say, the hardest part, to identify what keywords to use, and then just to go through these candidates and always think, is this additional keyword something I should include in my sourcing strategy? Like, for example, I'm looking at this candidate and I see Laravel, and I'm constantly thinking, is this another keyword or not? Like, but we know Laravel is not, because Laravel is the web development framework. Or what about HLS? You know, if I don't know what it is, then I Google it. What about Dash? If I don't know what it is, I Google it, right? And then suddenly you start recognizing more and more of these technical terms, not really like how to use them, obviously, but at least where do they belong to? Okay, is it clear? So that's how we found some really good candidates who are strong with JavaScript backend, frontend, but especially video related experience. Someone who has used whether FFmpeg or HLS or I don't know, some of these other codecs. Okay, cool. I guess we covered everything. Today it was faster than usually because I haven't started with the introduction of what is a front-end developer, back-end developer, full stack. We know it from the past sessions. So I just wanted to show you how to use GitHub to source for developers and how to identify who could be a good fit based on some of these keywords. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful. And don't forget, if you would like to dive deeper, we organize some different sessions. We have this Tech Recruitment Academy, which is here for individuals and teams. We have the members area. So a lot of great stuff is happening, even in the background. So stay tuned. And if you have any question, let me know. Adelina, you are allowed to talk now because your hand is up. So if you'd like, feel free to unmute and say hi if you'd like, because you raise your hand. So if it was just a, oh, great.
Hello, please. I think yes. By mistake, oh, but I want to say hello to you and nice meeting as usually. A lot of learn, a lot of things to learn.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. This hand is here to also indicate that you would like to say something or talk. So this is
yes, I do not know what's happened. Something happened here with my Zoom because I had problems from the beginning when I entered.
No worries,
okay, no okay, sorry.
It's good to practice, right? Like at some point we all should raise hand and practice this. So when yes, at some point you want to ask something, you don't start figuring out how. But you already know. So you already tried. That's great. The others here could also give it a try, either today or next time.
Okay.
All right. What's your plan for the weekend? Anything special, Adelina?
I have a lot of work in recruiting IT. I have a project for an international company. And we have to put the offer and to begin the recruiting. So it a lot of work in the weekend.
Oh yeah. Well, it is what it is. Yeah, like we need to tackle all these opportunities, right? While we have them. So
a lot of opportunities in IT recruitment.
Yes, yes,
in this moment.
Booming, right?
Booming,
So,
booming.
But the sun will be shining also next weekend. So this weekend you can work and you can enjoy it next weekend or the next one or the next one. Who knows?
Yes, of course, of course. Thank you very much. You have a great weekend also with your children.
Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Not just you, Adelina.
Yes.
So unless you guys have any question, let's wrap it up. Thank you, Morayo. Thanks, Brittany, Chris, Denisa, Elena, Juliana, Luz, Morayo, Sarah, and Sylvia. Have a wonderful weekend ahead, and I'll talk to you soon again.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.